Hypnotherapy is such a beautiful, like, crossover, or like you're in the crosshairs, right, of this spiritual space and then psychological space. And that's like a really fun place of interest for me. I don't necessarily have any psychological background in terms of studying or anything, but I'm really interested in why you enjoy the overlap of that, and why you feel that that's your wheelhouse, so to speak, in terms of your modality of practice. It's such a particular type of practice, and it's also one that like requires a lot of care, because you are in the depths of someone's psyche, not just their energy, right? It's a kind of a two-pronged approach. So I'm really interested in why this you landed in this space, and why it inspires you, and all of that.
Thank you so much for that question, Peachka. That's really, really thoughtful of you to ask. What I mentioned in the beginning, I'm very honored and privileged to be in this space to be a hypnotherapist because there is a large potential for anyone to take advantage of this position of power and authority if they did not have their place in the right intentions. And so when I think about what led me to this point, a lot of it was knowing that my family, I love my father for who he is. I love my mother for who they are, but they were really brought up with this fear and this uncertainty around taking care of their mental health. And it was through their unwillingness to take care of their mental health that a lot of their belief systems were projected onto me. And I went through my own traumas with these less than favorable belief systems and created even worse belief systems for myself, and also went through addiction. I am today a year and a half sober from using crystal meth because I was in a space of wanting to escape, to disassociate with all the trauma and all the belief systems that had been ingrained into me from parents and from the military. But I wanted to take authority over and ownership over my life in a way that wouldn't lead to suffering. There is a lot of uncomfort and discomfort in healing, but there was still something that I wanted to empower myself with. So when to answer your question more clearly, when I think about why I'm in this in particular, it's because one, I acknowledge that there is a disparity when it comes to people of color, specifically Black men, specifically some Black women who are choosing not to take care of their mental health, and I wanted to fill the void. I don't necessarily feel like going all the way up to get my PhD in psychology or psychotherapy is the best thing for me, but I do know that I want to operate in a sense that legally I can offer some form of avocational and vocational self-improvement and then incorporate my spiritual practice in it so that way I can acknowledge those like us who are in a metaphysical mindset, in a spirituality mindset, and wanting to get better, but feel uncomfortable approaching the traditional model of therapy. There have been many of us who have been hesitant to be honest and open about our spiritual experiences because it can land you with a diagnosis that is less than favorable, that has nothing to do with you, and then forces you to take medication that hijacks your brain and puts you in a place where you may not have access to your spiritual gifts in the same way previously. I'm not saying in any capacity that you shouldn't go see a mental health provider or that you shouldn't take medication if that is right for you. But there are many spiritual light workers, there are many metaphysically inclined people who feel one way or the other about this reality and are still aware that there needs to be some work done on their on their psyche, but are unwilling to go forward in pursuing help because of the stigma surrounding it, right? So again, to reinforce, I'm in what I'm doing because I want to offer a safe space for those that are like me, that look like me, and also heal from my own trauma, to heal generational trauma, to do my part in the best way possible, and make a little bit more of a, I'm not saying more, but I'm saying more of a like a legal, profound difference in the way that we approach our mental health.
That is So beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I have one more question for you because I personally
Yeah.
find this incredibly fascinating. Um,
Yeah.
so my final question for you before we wrap on your time, and again, thank you so much for sharing your gifts with us, for just being you authentically. That is, to me, the whole point of this is doing what we do and being who we are as authentically as possible in this safe space we've all collectively curated, which I think is
Right.
just so important, so important. So again, my final question, and then we will switch over. Um, is what is your favorite thing to offer hypnotherapy for? Like, what are your favorite kind of sessions? When I say favorite, I mean like what sessions are fun for you? Like, because this
Mm,
is this is heavy work, and I'm
right.
interested in the sessions that you like come out and you're like, oh, I've like that was fun. I'm really him right now. I wanna know what type of sessions makes you feel like that.
So hypnotherapy allows, and that's a great question to ask. Thank you. There are a lot of things, there's a lot of tools that I use within a therapeutic session in which, there's a way to release residual trauma in the body, a lot of somatic practices I know of. And primarily of all the things that I've been trained on with neurolinguistic programming, with emotional freedom technique, with learning new habit control, primarily it's imagery. We somewhat touched on that in today's practice with the chakras, imagining that color, visualizing it in the part of the body that aligns with the chakra and the energy point. But imagery allows us to use our imagination to get over obstacles and challenges that we're currently facing. So I've gone through seven different trainings specifically for imagery, and that way I could be classified as an imagery master. In that I know how to use specific hypnotic phrases and techniques in addition to incorporating imagination that basically any child would invoke when on the playground. So that way we can start facilitating change and awareness within ourselves. It's particularly useful for those who are in a state of wanting to discover themselves or be in connection with their spirit team, and where I'll offer, like, for example, I'll offer an imagery journey in which we're walking along a path and there are three different signposts, and you also pick up different jewels because you're in a castle or something like that. And while these are very objective types of imagery or symbols to use when we're talking about, signposts or, what this physical manifestation of a jewel might mean for you, it's subjective for every client that is working with me, where there's no two imagery journeys that end up being the same. They walk out and they take something completely different because their guides want them to acknowledge a part of themselves that they may consciously have been overlooking, that they may not have considered for themselves. So that way, when they're finished, they can say, wow, now I know how best to readdress, why I'm feeling stagnant in this area or another. Or now I understand a little bit more concretely what lights me up, what really brings passion and joy to my life. Because on the surface, I love to rollerblade. I love to play video games. I love to kiki with my friends at the park. But what really lights me up is, oh, the fact that I am creative, the fact that I can sit in my own silence and be comfortable with watching the birds fly past my window. And it seems so, simplistic, but we overlook this all the time, and imagery allows us to bring that out. So that's what I thoroughly enjoy, because it's so rewarding to watch somebody get out of state and just have this big ass cheesy grin on their face because they felt so good.
I love that so much. And on a personal note, knowing that part of it for you, the imagery especially, and like with my practice of like play and like bringing the energy of discovering the self into like TTRPGs and like characterization and seeing the self outside of the self, and discovering oneself and one's potential through play is so exciting. And so I'm really excited to talk to you about that and on a later date, we
Yeah,
do
please.
have a question in the Q&A from Tarisha. She's asking if you can help someone with addiction through hypnotherapy, and I believe that is the practice that you used for yourself. So
Mhm.
I want to also add to that, why is hypnotherapy particularly, oh, thank you, particularly good for addiction and addiction recovery?
I appreciate that. I really appreciate you asking that question, Teresa, because that is the primary focus of my specialty in my private practice. And I'm aware of the time and I want to be respectful to Kessa, so I'll be very brief with this. She's like, oh no. But for addiction in particular, I always remind anyone you need to this is a need. This is the very few times I'm going to say need or have to. For addiction recovery, you need to have something else to help support your recovery in addition to hypnotherapy. I have gone through addiction. I've overcome addiction. I've also used a lot of tools and resources within hypnotherapy to help me stay sober. But with any client that's seeking to use hypnotherapy, I always advise them within the first few sessions that we need to make sure that either A, you're going to meetings, B, your medical provider is aware of what's going on with you, or you're working with, a treatment facility, whether that's intensive outpatient treatment or intensive inpatient treatment, because addiction is more than just a physiological response. It is a psychological response that requires the special care of someone who has studied addiction and how it works on the brain and body. Now, again, with working within my practice, hypnosis helps because already with any substance that we take into our body, it puts us into a hypnotic state. It doesn't matter if you're drinking alcohol, if you're using marijuana, if you're using crystal meth. It heightens the awareness that you have in your body to instantly, not instantly, but very quickly put you into a trance-like state. And so when I work with clients, one, the whole basis of what I'm working with is to dehypnotize you, to get you out of that hypnotic trance-like state that those substances have put you in, because you're walking around doing things and saying things that may not align with your core values. The second thing that I primarily work with for clients in addiction recovery is building on self-confidence and self-esteem. So this is now reinforcing to your subconscious that you are worthy of achieving anything that you put your mind to. You are worthy of receiving good things in life. And just because you've made these choices in your past, or you've come up against some resistance where you weren't willing to address the traumas, doesn't mean that that is your end all be all. You are in the place that you're at right now, fully aware and fully cognizant of wanting to make change because Source is reminding you of your worth. Your spirit team is reminding you of your worth, and you are acknowledging that for yourself. Your soul at the very core is acknowledging you are worthy. And so it's about realigning not only your conscious desires to quit, but aligning the subconscious belief system too, that I can stop. I am building towards something positive in my future, and this is what it looks like. There are many things that I do with a client in recovery, specifically like just allowing you to build a stop mechanism of when you're about to use, what is your brain going to automatically say when you get to the point of wanting to use. We also go into detail about that self-confidence and self-esteem. We also address what it is that made you want to use in the first place and reshift our perception around why we feel uncomfortable about it in the first place. And then additionally, when it comes to the latter parts of my treatments with clients that are in addiction recovery, it's building upon the imagery of what the future looks like. So that way you don't walk out of session going, okay, it's great that I know my tools of how not to use and how to be kind to myself, but what does it really look like when I'm sober? And by doing that, reinforcing through imagery, through other various techniques, the confidence, the feeling, the experiential belief of what this new future looks like for you, you can then begin to subconsciously align, excuse me, with what you consciously believe is a possibility for yourself. It's multifaceted. And I know that was kind of winded and wordy, but that's the best way I can put that. What does a future that I want to exist look like? Right. So I see Miss Honeybee is asking that question, and that is a difficult thing oh, okay. Peachka is asking. I see that as a difficult question we ask ourselves. At least I asked myself when I was in early recovery, like within the first 3 months, we genuinely don't know. Sometimes we genuinely don't know. And that's what I would also encourage you to feel comfortable Accepting is that it's okay not to know where you want to go. It's okay not to know what your purpose is or what specifically you were called here to be on this earth for, but at least starting to frame the idea around, okay, if I'm at least still alive, right? There's something that is going to come forward at some place, some point in time. And I'm just open to receiving, at least acknowledging for myself that I'm alive, that I'm here, that I'm gifted with the ability to still speak and talk. I'm not incarcerated. I'm not dealing with any other losses other than what we're currently dealing with right now. And then as we continue moving forward with just building that self-confidence and self-esteem of like, what was life previous to you using, you can then start to build on some kind of like foundations because it's still a figuring out process. You're not going to have all your answers of what you're going to feel like and look like. I still don't know what I'm going to be doing in 5 years from now. Somebody asked me that and the other day, and I was like, great question, because I genuinely don't know. I'm only a year and a half into this, right? And I say only, but that's a very freaking long time for anyone who's in recovery. That's a long time. One day is a long time. Just, I encourage anybody to take it one step at a time, one day at a time. If you got to take it meal by meal, that's okay. But just remind yourself that you are still alive for a very good reason. That reason will become aware it will come to you in a dream. It will come to you in the passing of somebody that says something to you at the supermarket that will make you think and go, oh, it's so lovely to hear that I am loved, that I am appreciated for this thing in particular. And that's when you start to just kind of like unearth more things about how your past can be connected to your future. So I think that's the best way of answering that.
That is so beautiful. Thank you again for sharing. Thank you for answering all of my questions, all of my questions, and all of our questions, and just sharing your gift and sharing your insight with us. I think it's really, really important to talk about not only addiction, but just like what you were saying, why addiction exists in the first place, which is a desire to escape, right? A desire to escape whatever life is currently throwing at you, whatever you're experiencing, right? It's like a desire to get out of this right now. And I think as we understand the healing of trauma, we also understand why people would rather do anything than move through it, than deal with
Right.
it, than face it head on, especially depending on what you've moved through in your experience, you know? And so when we understand the sort of escapism, we can all relate to that. We can all
Right.
relate to a desire to escape how we're feeling, what we're thinking, what our existence is how our existence is showing up, how it's manifesting, right? And it's just so important to talk about, I think, in ways that are, for you, I feel rooted or started with addiction, and it will soon, very soon, expand into so many other spaces that you are going to start to see the parallels, and you're going to start to see how, oh, all of this is connected, all of this is the same, whether people are codependent on substances or other people or the government or whatever. A lot of people are recovering from codependency regardless of what
Right.
they're codependent with, you know. And at the end of the day, all codependency is not great codependency, you know. And I think there is this is really important. I say all that to say this is really important, and I'm so grateful that you shared with us.
And I do want to remind people too, don't call yourself an addict. Don't call yourself an alcoholic. That does not serve you well when it comes to moving past the obstacle. I know that 12-step programs harp on that, but I personally, from a spiritual and metaphysical belief system, that is a limiting belief that sets you up for failure long term. So don't identify with that. But that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Thank you again so